Hi everyone and welcome to Turf Talk Down Under. I'm Angie and today I've got Steph and Anna with me. Now,
Hello.
Steph and Anna are here with me for a reason. They're going to be talking about the IWD conference that's coming up in March. But before we do that, we're going to kick off with the local news, the Aussie news. So yeah, I've got a few articles here. Excuse the glasses. Senator Claire Chandler did an amazing speech yesterday on men in women's prisons. Maura Deeming also was on Sky News the other night talking about the same thing. She had a much briefer little conversation about it, but we're kind of trying to get the news out. We have also had some protests down in Tasmania. There was a protest outside the Hobart Leisure Centre, which now admits men into the female changing rooms. There was a protest outside the Advocate newspaper because their chief editor wrote a very dismissive piece about people protesting against men being in the female change rooms at the Hobart Pool. And there's a lot of action going on down there because they've got Drag Queen Story Hour, of course, like every other state. But the guy who they've got to read books to children in Tasmania is on Facebook talking about his urine fetish and talking about masturbation. And yes, and
that's
Hobart,
just what you want the kids Googling, isn't it?
It is. They don't do background checks on any of these creeps.
No,
yes, mermaids.
Sorry, Steph.
No,
that editor from The Advocate, he refused to meet with Women Speak Tasmania, refused to meet with LGB Tasmania, and I think one other group, he refused to meet with them because they wanted to talk to him about their concerns. And his language in dismissing them was really immoderate. It just made me think, what sort of skin has this guy got in the game that he is so committed to allowing men to get changed in the female change rooms? He was almost hysterical in his language.
And it's not even as if there's absolutely no evidence, as certain people like to say. We've got Darren Merriger over in California and the Wee Spa debacle, where people were denying it occurred at all, and other people saying, well, she's a trans woman, so therefore she's entitled to be in there. And he turned out to be a registered a convicted sex offender. I noticed this week on the 2nd, a trans-identified male in Ohio has been given multiple charges of indecent exposure for exposing himself in the female section of the YMCA change rooms.
So, I get contacted by women here saying, I was in a change room, usually in Brunswick or somewhere like that, that's very woke. I was in the pool and a man walked in and started getting undressed and he was looking right at us. You know, we get these reports all the time. And the people who are making the reports are told to just, we can't do anything about it. And unless it's their word against the trans-identified person. So unless they can prove it was willful exposure, these creeps get away with it. Yeah. And anyone can say that they're trans now. So you could just be a normal dude, walk into the female change rooms, get your dick out, and then go, but I'm a transgender woman.
Yeah. And even in states where they haven't yet passed sex self-ID, and they haven't yet in Queensland, although they soon will, but because there's so much acceptance of it and so much policy push from government, women are more likely to not challenge blokes now when they come into women's space. You know, they know that something's going on, that the government thinks it's fine for men to come into women's public toilets, women's public change rooms, and so they're less likely to say anything. And that's the way it is.
We have our Minister for Women saying that worries about our safety is a cloak for transphobia. So on the 2nd of December, when she introduced this bill, she really set a negative tone for open discussion about the entire situation. Yes.
I think the similarities between our Minister for Women, Shannon Fentiman, and the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, are extraordinary, even down to the language, because Nicola Sturgeon said just a few days ago that the women who are concerned about safety and privacy issues, it's a cloak for their transphobia. It was like straight out of the mouth of Shannon Fentiman.
Yeah.
It's the cult script, isn't it? It's they read, they get told what they have to say and they say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Despicable. Absolutely
Anyway,
despicable.
sorry for hijacking your news. Yep.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Yeah, we've had there's a famous surfer in the US, Bethany Hamilton, has come out and said that women should boycott elite surfing events if they include men. She still gets an income from surfing, so that's a big call. Good for her.
Yeah.
More and more female athletes are coming out. Of course, we don't hear about it in the Australian media, of course. What else have we got? We've got the University of Technology, Sydney, has given a scholarship to encourage women to do engineering to a man. And the Victorian government has given a scholarship of $5,000 to encourage women to go into comedy to a man.
Yeah.
So it's more roles going off to men in the name of inclusivity. Yes, relevant to Australia, Kelly J kicked off a very successful event in Glasgow, which fed into what's happening over there with self-ID and with men in female prisons. And she had hundreds and hundreds of women turn up. And it was very inspiring because I'm hoping that Melbourne can put on a similar show. And yes, the trans activists turned up and they were kept away by a very responsible police force.
Yeah.
And the women, the atmosphere appeared to be electric. They had a wonderful time and a whole bunch of new people tuned in and saw women speaking up for their rights and talking about the things that the mainstream media refuses to cover. It was amazing.
Those women from Glasgow were just extraordinary, one after the other. They wwere fueled by rage, and their rage made them so articulate. Excuse me. And the part of it that I watched about an hour, and each speaker spoke about a different thing. I mean, I was in tears at times. It was so moving. They all spoke from different perspective and they were all fueled by rage. It was it was electric.
The woman that spoke about autism was like a punch in the guts for me. She was spot on about the capture of autism orgs and of, vulnerable children. Like it was amazing. But see, this is it. These are not professional speakers.
No.
These are women with a fire in their belly, and we have those here.
They're us.
I just hope that people do come out and they share their stories, because there's no such thing in this game as, a bad speaker. You just got to get up there and speak your truth,
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that a lot of people come and tell their stories, because if you don't want to hear, if you don't want blokes to get a chance to speak, which they probably won't, or you don't want to hear someone from who you consider the wrong political class to speak, get up and share your story yourself. Come and tell us how gender ID or gender self-ID or this whole ideology has impacted you and your loved ones or your work, or come and tell us, because we're here to listen. I just really hope we get big numbers at these events. And looking at Glasgow, I know Melbourne is capable of that. We just need to get people to overcome this fear of what the others are doing, and just come out and share your stories. It'd be great. What other news have we got? Oh, that's about it that I can see here. I can barely see with or without my glasses. But the reason that we've got you ladies in to talk today is because of IWD creeping up in March. And Steph, you particularly want to talk about prisons. That's your
Yes.
special interest in this. You know a lot about it, and it's quite, it's quite the topic at the moment. It seems to be the things that initially people didn't really care that there were men in women's prisons, but after what's happened in Scotland, people are starting to pay attention and really think about it.
Yes, well, it's been a train wreck in Scotland, and Sturgeon has suffered quite a lot because of the way things have happened. But, I think Denton's and James Morton and the people who orchestrated allowing men into women's prisons, they did it in the background, just like Denton's tells them to, with the hope that no one would give two hoots about women in prison. And so, it's gone this far. But once the rubber hits the road and the media actually starts reporting on what this actually entails, then people go, well, no, that's not okay, and are quite vocal about it, thankfully. So I was thinking about that, and because there's quite, I know Anna and maybe Sal Grover have received letters from Fentiman in last year saying, well, we don't, we've taken a lot of pointers from the Scottish consultation process and used a lot of their work in the background. So I don't know what she's going to say now, because it's kind of blown up in Sturgeon space and the SNP space. So I was thinking about the timeline, if you have a minute to just go through that, because it felt like at a certain period, it was just every day something was going on. So the Attorney General introduced the bill to Queensland on the 2nd of December last year. And on the 22nd of December, Sturgeon slammed their bill through. You might remember, like, they were whipped to vote for it. Some people did vote opposite to what they were told to do. And I think it's widely recognised they've now been vindicated in that stance. So Fentiman introduced on the 2nd of December, and on the 11th of January, submissions closed. So she gave us next to no time at all to provide submissions and feedback around this bill. And funnily enough, in the government's response, which to the submissions, they actually say, well, it's unfortunate we haven't had a very good chance at looking at all the submissions because of the close time frame. I'm like, you don't say. Who would be responsible for that short time frame, I wonder? Anywho, so the submissions closed on the 11th, and then on the 15th, so I think the 11th was a Tuesday. So by the weekend, we were hearing about a convicted sex offender who had committed multiple sex offences against women in spaces like women's toilets and women's change rooms across the period from 1999 to 2013. His name's Jonathan Mallon. He allegedly had been boasting he would be in the female prison estate by Easter. So that's in Scotland, that happened. And then the next day, the UK made the decision, and the announcement, I think, was made that they would utilise Section 35 to block the Scottish Self-ID Bill because of how it interacts with the UK Equality Act. And it's like there's a fundamental contradiction there, I think, is what the UK government is saying. And so, no, Scotland, you can't do that. Then on the 21st, so 5 days later, Albert Caballero, who is in male prison for abducting and raping a care worker, has been reported for wanting to move into the female prison estate. 2 days later, I think that was on a Tuesday too, we had our hearings in Queensland. And I think there's a clip of Jonty Bush telling Sal, well, have you read the government's response? And Sal's like, yes, I have, it's rubbish. Nonsense. No, sorry, I think she said, yes, it's nonsense. And I think Jonty Bush is talking about, well, you know, the government's talked about how risk assessments occur when people might be transferred to the female prison estate. And wouldn't you know, that same day or the next day, Adam Graham / Isla Bryson was convicted and of 2 rapes and sent to the female prison estate in segregation for risk assessment. So a lot of people have said, well, if you're going to be fair dinkum about this risk assessment process, then the judge said that individual should be sent to a male prison estate. So someone has stepped in and changed that direction, first of all, and you are telegraphing that this is where you think this person belongs. And then it became about, well, some larrikins have been talking about, well, there's now 3 sexes. There's men and women and rapists. Because Nicola Sturgeon just tied herself in absolute knots trying to say, now we must remember this individual, when asked, is this person a male or a female? This person is a rapist. It's like, oh, is that the 3rd gamete? What? Oh, anyway, so that is still like, it's still rolling on, essentially, because Keith Brown, I think his name is, the head of prisons, said this is the correct place for Graham / Bryson. The next day, Nicola Sturgeon said, actually, no. And that afternoon, he was hoiked back to the male estate. So then people are like, well, okay, so you are admitting that not trans women aren't women then, aren't you? That's what you're saying. You're a TERF now too, Nicola. Congrats. So it also came out in the days after that Adam Graham had been accepted into a beauty course where he was paired up with young women who were doing tanning and stuff where they had to be partially unclothed. So the risk assessment, even like, because he was using a different name back then, but allowing any male, like it, and he was on bail. He had to have been on bail for these horrendous charges. How did he get accepted to that course? And how is he being supervised to be like, for the police to, like, maybe they weren't aware, but how did he get accepted to that course? And those young women are now feeling mortified about what had gone on. And apparently the reported behaviour of him during that course was just rank, like accusing everyone of transphobia, making teachers cry, I think, even, like, just really horrific behaviour.
You know what, Steph, that timeline that you've given us and the parallel between Queensland and Scotland, if we had a half-decent mainstream media in this country, including the ones that are funded by the public purse, they would be making those comparisons. They would be drawing the parallels between Queensland and Scotland, because it's so obvious to all of us.
Well, listen, I'm not done yet. Because
I know.
Sturgeon sent Bryson / Graham back to the male estate. And then on either the 28th or the 29th, it became known in the media that Andrew Burns, who is also known as Tiffany Scott, had been risk assessed and approved for female to be transferred. Now, he is in prison indefinitely because, quote, he is an unmanageable risk to public safety.
Yeah.
How did he get approved via this risk assessment process for transfer to the female estate?
Is he the one that was masturbating in front of the female guard?
And he's the one that smeared. No, that's an American case. I'm pretty sure. No, he did a dirty protest. I think he smeared feces or spat blood at guards.
He's the one who bit his vein. He bit his vein to get the blood.
Gross. And he also tore an allegedly untearable fabric. Like yes, and he's on an indefinite sentence. So how, like, because Jonty Bush was like, oh, the risk assessment process works. Well, this is what the risk assessment process has resulted in. And how is that possible?
So we have reports of assaults in Australian prisons.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just the overseas stuff. I mean,
No.
Do you know how many trans-identified males are in Queensland jails?
On the 30th of June, there were 63 trans-identified males in the male estate. What they can't or won't tell us is how many post-operative individuals are in the female estate, because that, I think, is where they would automatically get placed because their birth certificates have been changed. And I've asked multiple times for that, and I'm worried that they can't even tell because of the way the legislation's, and that would match up with what Stasia found from Victorian prisons, where they can't even tell how many men are there, even under self-ID.
It was a trans-identified male who tried to find that out. He tried to find out how, yeah, it was Paulie. And he contacted, this is way before we all sort of, you know, tried to find this out for ourselves. Years ago, he tried to find out how many trans-identified males were in the female prison, and they were recorded as female. And that was before self-ID. So any assaults, anything that goes on in a female jail caused by a trans-identified male will be recorded as a female thing.
And that's what I keep saying. This is not fair. And that's what the Not Our Crimes hashtag is all about. You know, when you hide male violence, how can you address it? It's impossible to address it if some of it is just sequestered off, out of sight. Oh, we don't need to talk about that type of male violence. Well, yeah, we bloody well do. So, sorry, I've just got two more things.
Yep, go.
So yeah, then she had to do a U-turn on that, on Tiffany Scott, because clearly that's a disaster and a debacle. And then everyone was like, well, there's still that Eastwood chap, the murderer or attempted murderer who likes to dress in nappies and identifies as transgender, and also Katie Dolotowski, who is a convicted pedophile, once taking photos or trying to take photos of a girl in public toilet facilities, and then attempting to rape another girl in a shopping centre toilet. He was out of prison on a supervision order and was discovered to be staying in a women's refuge where children were living. And so that sent him back to prison because clearly he was not following the conditions of his order. He went to male prison, and then when he assaulted another male inmate, they sent him to the female estate. And that happened in November last year, and women were like, are you insane? He's 6'5", and he has assaulted a male prisoner. He's a pedophile. He's a convicted pedophile. Everyone knows this. It's true. So how did your risk assessments get him in there? And when all this blew up, they've just quietly released him back on another supervision order, back into the community.
Yeah. And most of these prisons have mother-baby units. Female prisons have mother-baby units. So these men still have access to children. It's disgusting. 6'5".
Oh, yes, he's massive. And then just on Sunday, a young girl went missing in Scotland and was discovered 27 hours later. And a man who has two profiles on Facebook, one with a female name and one with a male name, has been arrested. So, and the Scottish Prison Service, I think, I'm not sure what's going on, but they have said a man has been arrested. So it looks like someone in the Scottish Prison Service at least has peaked and they're done. So if Queensland and Australian media can actually start reporting accurately and talking about this issue, you're right. Like, once it starts being known, because there are 63 men in the male estate identifying as trans on the 30th of June in Queensland. There are like Well, we have a similar population to Scotland in Queensland, and they have like either 14 or 16 trans-identified males. How do we get 63? There's 6 murderers or alleged murderers. Like, and there's 13 in there for charges of or convictions of aggravated sexual assault. So, you know, that's nearly 20 on really, really serious charges. And if we allow self-ID to occur, they'll be able to demand transfer. It's just ludicrous.
There's a man in a Western Australian jail at the moment who I know from social media who has been charged with sex offences, and the media aren't reporting it, obviously, because a minor is involved. And he was in a female jail, and he was talking about it all over social media. And he said, "Oh, you know, I reckon 70% of women in here are Aboriginal. Oh, and they were so lovely. They were so kind." That's the other thing that really pisses me off. Most of the Greens and Labor politicians who pretend to give a crap about Indigenous women are placing male sex offenders in female jails with wrongly imprisoned Indigenous women who are in there on fines, women who are in there for, you know, like lesser offences by anyone's standard, women who have experienced domestic violence a lot of the time, genuinely vulnerable women who go to jail because they can't afford to pay their fines, basically, you know.
When women are in prison for murder, it's well documented that the particulars of female perpetrated homicide are far different to male perpetrated. So there's overkill, there is significantly higher levels of violence, and a lot of the time these women, when they are convicted of murder of an intimate partner, it's as a result of chronic victimization. And so it's response violence rather than, you know, the perpetrator using violence to coerce and control.
The other thing about that is that that's related is that when we look at the submissions in Queensland that were put in for and against the sex self-identification legislation, and we look at those that were called to provide verbal evidence at the hearing on 24 January, it's primarily the government-funded organisations, some of whom are funded to support women in prison. They're the ones arguing in favour of the legislation. And it's the unfunded voluntary little women's groups like yours and mine, Steph, and some academics and some Christians that were the ones arguing against. So the women's groups that are funded to support these women are the ones who are selling them out the most.
But their grants rely upon them towing the line. And
that's true.
That's been women's grants. I had a bit of to and fro with the Office for Women a few years ago, because, you know, how can you have a service advocating for women when you also tell them in order to get this money, you have to include men?
Yeah. You tick a box. You have to tick a box. We apply for grants because my friend and I, we coordinate a domestic violence service for mothers in the local area. And in order to get grants to pay our overheads, that's the only income we have is, you know, council grants. All of the local council grants and all of the state governments grants have a little tick box where you tick a box that says you agree to admit, you know, people of whatever gender. And in order to get a sex-based exemption, like, you know, rarely some of the domestic violence orgs have them, you have to go through all these loopholes. Yeah. It's just crazy what they make you do. So, you know, we're basically not funded. We're reliant on donations from, you know, in order to pay our.
But, you know, the other thing about that is that it's actually more than just organisations feeling obliged to support the line that the government is pushing. It's more than that. They embrace that line. You can tell from reading the submissions, from listening to them as they gave verbal evidence on the 24th of January, they've embraced that. They're captured. They're as captured as is the state and the big corporations. You know, one of the, probably arguably the worst presented case at the verbal hearings was an organisation that one of the people who presented for the organisation actually led a little march last November. He thought he was leading a march at the public meeting that we'd organised on the 12th of November, but in fact we'd moved and we had an alternative venue. But he had his little march and he's bellowing for, it was quite, made my blood run cold to hear his chanting, "We demand self-ID for DV shelters and women's prison." You know, this huge bloke. And he presented the case, or he was one of the two who presented the case on the 24th of January. It was almost embarrassing to listen to him, actually, to both of them, because even when they were given Dorothy Dixes by their mate, Jonty Bush, they couldn't respond. They couldn't answer the questions. But they've embraced it, was my original point. I went off a bit, but they've embraced that line. They're pushing it.
And to be honest, though, you know, like, I think most of the women that I know that were part of these grassroots orgs, they've all left in disgust. And it's these younger women whose lives haven't been impacted to the same degree by, you know, men, basically, who are really pushing this stuff through these organisations, even including the media. You know, most of the resistance, most of the people that have contacted me or people, you know, who talk about this sort of stuff are from an older generation. And the younger ones just seem content to sell out every other woman.
Yeah, so, but Anna, I'm not the only person speaking, am I? You've got some bangers coming. It's quite exciting.
Well, I'm very excited about the conference coming up, and it's the 18, 19, 20, it's the 6th year that we've had a feminist IWD march and rally, and it must be the 4th or 5th year that we've had a conference. And last year, 2022, it was a 3-day conference, and this year it's also a 3-day conference. And look, I'm probably biased, but I think the speaker lineup is absolutely stupendous. We've got 20 speakers across 3 days, and that includes the rally, which is half a day of that 3 days. And we've got a wide age range. We've got, you know, a 19-year-old, but we've also got someone who I think is 80. And one of the things that I really like is that we've got a number of women who are second wavers, women, especially lesbian women, who were involved from the 70s, because I think it's really very exciting that we're getting an injection into the women's movement with the growing fight for women's sex-based rights. And so many women are very new. They've never had any involvement in the women's movement before. They've not even thought about particular issues. And so the fact that the second wavers, and especially the lesbian second wavers, are prepared to come to this conference and share their experience, I think that it augurs well for younger women who are just getting involved. And sure, we're not everyone who's presenting describes herself as a radical feminist. Perhaps not everyone even calls herself a feminist, but in my view, everyone who's presenting makes a big contribution to the struggle for women's rights. And that's the important thing. And yes, we have differences. Of course, we have differences. And I don't think that we should pretend that we have no differences. And I don't think that, I know in some circles, you're not allowed to use the A word, the abortion word, because the women who are fighting for women's sex-based rights aren't all of one mind. And so sometimes women say, well, let's not talk about abortion. That isn't my position. I think we do need to be able to talk about the things that divide us and also talk about the things that unite us. So I'm really excited about the conference, as well as the 3 days of presentations and discussion and drinks and meals. On the 4th day, for people who are available, we'll go to a small island, Moreton Bay Island, tiny little island. You can walk around it, and we'll do some walking and eating and talking and maybe swimming. So it'll be a really great 4 days, I think.
And you're live streaming the speakers this year, Anna?
Yes, I hope it works. But yeah, that's the plan. To live stream.
Don't put me in charge of it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Stream to the Facebook page, not to the YouTube channel. To live stream, so you just go on the IWD Brisbane Meanjin Facebook page, and of course the presentations will also go up onto the YouTube channel as soon as possible after the events. Of course, the Q&A panels and the discussions will not be recorded, and that's a commitment that I always make to women who come to our events, that if you're coming to listen and to engage in informal discussion, your identity, horrible word, your identity is secure. You will not be recorded. Only the presenters will be videoed and recorded. And in fact, not even all of the speakers will be videoed, because as we all know, it's a dangerous job these days to be involved in the defense of women's rights. And so I think there's 4 of the 20 speakers. The audio will be there of their presentations, but their video will not. And I mean, one of the things I'm particularly excited about is that this year we've got 2 overseas guests. So we've got Tanya Sturt from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and she'll be reporting on the situation in New Zealand, and that will be really good for building connections between the 2 countries. And we have Sheila Jeffries from the UK, who lived in Australia for a long time and taught feminist studies at University of Melbourne a long time ago in the 90s, but returned to the UK in 2015. And so she's coming back for a visit, and I was very fortunate because, and this is thanks to Renata Klein and Susan Hawthorne from Spinifex, who are good friends of Sheila's, and they said to me, look, why don't you have Sheila come and present? And you know, they're friends of hers, they know her, so Sheila's going to come to the conference and she'll present twice, and you know, the rest of us can fangirl away as much as we like.
Hey, I fangirl for Renata and Susan, so you know.
Yeah, I think a few of us do.
Well, I went last year. We flew up to Brisbane last year, and it was a wonderful event. I highly recommend tuning into the talks, because it was very moving for me to have so many women in the one room talking about issues that are of concern to all of us, and you know, a broad range of issues too. It's not just about the gender stuff. You know, there was talks on you know, family violence. There's talks on a whole bunch of things that affect women that have all been silenced.
Yes. And the one important thing, I think I hadn't realized this until I saw a post on the Spinifex Facebook page, but of the 20 presenters, 7 are authors with Spinifex.
Ooh.
So
Wow.
that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for your feminist literature, head over to Spinifex Press.
Yes.
Yeah, and they have good sales on too. So yeah,
they do.
Wow. No, I really wish I could get to Brisbane, but no, we will. For the next few weeks on Turf Talk, we'll have some of the speakers from IWD to get in the mood for the IWD conference, because poor IWD has been a little bit overshadowed by Kelly J coming out in the same month. So as Aussies who platform Aussies, we have to promote you heavily on this channel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Wow,
Ange.
things are certainly, hotting up here in Australia. The trans rights activists seem particularly agitated at the moment. They can probably sense what's going on overseas and are feeling threatened. I think it's only a matter of time before the mainstream media is forced to report on this. Maybe Kelly J will be the catalyst. Maybe IWD will be the catalyst. But I think we're sort of coming up to boiling point here that, the average everyday Aussie has had enough. They've had enough of this protected class being prioritised above everybody else, of the TQ whatever. Everybody can see it. So I think we just got to keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully peak trans will come.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yes, and thank you very much for what you do for women in prison there, Steph. You're
well, I'm not doing much yet.
Yes, you
get
are.
The word out. You're talking about it. You're recording information. You're really helping to let people know what's actually going on.
You're persisting in the data collection. I mean, you've had so many setbacks when they don't respond to your requests for data, and you just keep on and keep on. You make the phone calls, you write the letters, and sometimes they have to give in and provide you with the data you've asked for.
Well, one really ironic thing about my most recent data that I received, I got it on the same day Shannon Fentiman introduced the self-ID bill. So the 2nd of December, they were emailing me my data. It's like, no evidence, hey? Is that right? 63 males could be demanding transfer. What about them?
They keep telling us that trans people are a tiny minority, but every time I leave my house, I see them. And 63 men in prison that identify as women that we know of only in the male estate. That's a huge proportion of the prison population.
Well, there's only 800 on that same day. There were 852 women. So, it's not comparable to this alleged tiny minority, because, when you look at things like murder, there were 6 males, alleged or convicted murderers, who identified as trans in the male estate. There were only 39 women out of the whole of Queensland for that same charge of conviction. So, and as I said before, female homicide, perpetrated homicide, is very different to male perpetrated homicide. And who are these men? Because, it is highly likely, given what we've seen from other males who've identified as transgender and are perpetrators of homicide, there is sexual elements to those murders, and they can be horrific.
Well, Paul Denyer, one of the worst serial killers in Australia, identified as a woman for a decade in prison, spent millions of dollars of taxpayers' money requesting hormones, surgery, hair ties, whatever. And then just before he went out on parole, he was applying for parole, and he's like, oh no, I'm really a man.
And wasn't he initially a person who stole underwear, women's underwear?
Yeah, before he murdered them. Yeah, it's escalating.
It's a gateway offence. It's quite concerning. So who are these 6 men? That's what I would like to know. And not because I want to, invade anyone's privacy, but we need to know the particulars of their offending, because just the fact of those individuals being male is enough to terrify women, because you know, being able to accurately sex someone is an evolutionary process. Even infants can do it. So it's not like you can just damp it down and ignore it. You see a male, you know they're a male. And if you know that that's a male and you're locked up with him, and then you also find out he's a murderer, how absolutely terrifying would that be?
Well, look at Reginald Arthurall.
Oh, yep.
Regina. He murdered somebody. He's changed his name and he's off in the community living as a woman after murdering 3 people. You can hear about him on Clive Simpson's channel if anyone's watching. Yeah, you know, a triple murderer who now identifies as a woman and goes by the name of Regina. And he's a horrific human being.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're out there. This is not make-believe. This is not some abstract thing that happens in other countries. And because of the way that our legislators are fudging the statistics, we don't even know. We don't know. That's the disturbing part. And women in prison are completely voiceless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not anymore, because there's quite a few Australian women who are standing up and trying to give them a voice. So, yeah, it'll be good. Oh, goodness me. What a heavy topic. It's been a bit of a tough day today. One of our regular viewers, as we found out this morning, has passed away. So I've had a bit of a heavy day. Yeah, but, you know, there's a few things to look forward to. With IWD in March, with Kelly J coming out in March, with the Australian public waking up to the dangers of this ideology. Yeah, and thank you to both of you for the wonderful work that you do. You know, we just got to keep plugging away and we'll get there. And, you know, to paraphrase Kelly J, we'll win this. You know, we will. We just got to keep talking. So, yeah. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you want to know more about IWD Brisbane, go over to their Facebook page or follow them on Twitter. Steph, Fair Go for Queensland Women, where are you represented?
Facebook and Twitter as well.
Yep, Facebook and Twitter. All right. You want to support Steph's work in, you know, looking out for women in jail? That'd be great. Cool. See you next week, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Ange.
Oh, anytime. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. See you, everyone. See you, Steph.
See ya.